everyone, it's Christina of CraftyPaws. I'm here with episode 5 of my Copic hair coloring series. This little cutie is from the Greeting Farms Magical Kit stamp set, and she's a little fairy that I've colored up with ombre hair. The first step that I'm taking is following along the actual lines of the stamped image. When there's wavy hair like this and there's great line detail like this, it's an easy way to get in some initial shading. I'm using a mid-tone violet color. This is V06, and I'm just following along the lines of the stamped image and trying to establish texture. Now I'm going in with a slightly darker violet color. This is a RV66, and I'm following along the same lines where I put that mid-tone, but I'm confident now that those shaded areas are where I want the darkest tones in this violet section of her hair. I'm adding a little bit more there on the outside curve, and I'm also adding some shading, this darker tone, behind the little fairy girl. I'm also extending some extra little flicks behind her, kind of emanating from her body, from her feet and down, and I'm also adding some flicks from the bottom of her curly hair on up. At this point, I've decided to add the lightest tone. I want to make sure that I don't, saturate her hair with too many of the dark violets. And so I'm using the lightest violet in this trio. This is V12. Now I'm going back in and adding some more of the darkest shades behind her hands, adding some extra little flicks along the bottom. Now that I've spaced in some of the lightest tones, I know I have enough space to put in some of this darkest violet. Behind her, there's going to be the darker tone. Now I'm going in and filling in the lightest areas a little bit more. And now I'm bringing in the blue violet. This is a mid-tone blue violet. It's a BV04. And I'm just trying to figure out where the transition will take place. It's going to be behind her little wings, behind her face. And I'm now trying to establish where I think the shadows will be on the part of her hair that's more on her head. I'm going to have some shadows in her little bangs there, where the hair is kind of pulled close to her head behind that flower. Those are the areas where I'm putting in that mid-tone. Where I feel confident with that shading, now I'm going in with my darkest blue violet, which is a BV08. I'm making sure the area behind her face, the areas cinched in close to her face there, behind the flower. I'm also following now the lines of the stamped image where those guidelines are for her hair, defining the little sections of her hair there. I'm putting in the darkest blue violet, and I'm making sure I'm trying to flick in the direction of the curve of her head. Now I'm taking a black, it's actually a cool gray. This is a C9, and I'm putting that in the base, the center of her part. Now I'm going back in. I'm not confident about how I want to transition that black to the blue violet. So I'm going in and I'm moving on to a different part of the image. I've gone now to extend the transition area, the blue violet to the violet, and I'm adding some of the lightest blue violet as well as the mid-tone and the dark blue violet. The more flicks you add, the more realistic this will look. That light blue violet, that's a BV02, and the mid-tone again is a BV04. And I think the more flicks, like I said, that you add, the more it looks like real hair. Adding that texture really makes a difference. Now I'm extending that black area of her part with a slightly lighter gray. This is a C6. And I just want to make sure that I'm not, having the stark contrast of the black with the white. So I wanted this top part of her head to look really deep and rich in color. So I'm adding more of the C9 to further make that top of her head really deep dark. And I'm going back in with the dark blue violet at the base of her head, and I'm extending that further up in toward her part. I'm doing that along all of the base areas of her head. That blue violet is being extended. And now I'm transitioning. I'm not really happy with that transition at the top of her head, so rather than toil over it, I'm moving on to the bottom of her hair, adding some more of the deepest red violet or violet. So that is the RV66, and that's one of the last steps of that section anyway. I'm just reestablishing that darkest color because some of the red violet had been bleached out a little bit when I had added the lighter violets. And so I'm reestablishing the richness of those shadowed areas at the bottom of her hair and adding again more flicks so that you can really get a sense of it being hair at the bottom as well. I'm adding more flicks at the bottom of the curve of that wave in her hair and making sure or trying to make sure that these flicks are as light a touch as possible. That way those flicks are thinner and it looks more like hair when you look at it from afar at the end. I'm trying to make sure that behind her, between her legs, under her hands, all of those areas get enough of the darkest red violet shade so that it looks like a natural shading would be. That area under her left hand, behind her body, I'm just trying to add extra little flicks. Now I wanted to extend the area of where the blue violet connects with that violet. So I'm taking that darkest blue violet, that's the BV08, and reestablishing that darkness and extending out those flicks a little bit further into the violet area. And I think that transition is really finally starting to come together. Now I feel like I can move back up toward the top of her head and come back in and add those dark blue violet shades. I want the whole head of hair to have the same amount of saturation and color. So that going back and forth is an easy way to do that. It's multiple layers of adding color. I'm adding more of that blue violet and the cool gray so that it connects more. And now I decided I really wanted that top of her head to look more rich. So I'm taking the darkest blue that I have. That's a B39, super dark. It's a blue-black almost. And I'm connecting that black area to that BV area with this dark, dark blue. And I think I'm finally happy with that deep blue connecting the blue violet and the black areas and giving the top of her head a really deep saturated color. You're not getting the full effect of that because of the bright lights I have. And you'll see in the final pictures how she comes out looking very rich and colorful. The final step is to just add some little detail flicks, extending just a little bit further the blue-violet area as it transitions to the violet area. And I think those final details, just having that overlap area, is what gives her a beautiful ombre look in the end. I hope you enjoyed this process video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys are having a wonderful crafty day.